Good to see you. Is that a live? What are those called? Fiddle leaf plants? Is that one
It
next to you?
it is. It's my figgle leaf. It's hanging in there. It doesn't get as much sunlight as it probably would like, but it's
Yeah.
doing well.
Yeah, I've got one behind me too, which is just fortuitous that we've got that in common. So
Gotta have
um
a matching plant life. We're not
matching
plant
plant life.
killers. It's always a good sign.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot into having plants, and I have not been a plant person before, but I bought a plant, kept it alive for a couple months, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go for a second one.
You're like, I can do this. There's
Yeah,
potential here.
and now there's plants everywhere. Did you get into a similar plant game yourself?
Yes, we have lots of house plants, and I have, I think, four orchids at this point that I've gotten to rebloom, which seems like a really big accomplishment. So I'm hoping to keep the reblooms going because if you can, they usually bloom like two or three times a year, depending on the type of orchid. So you gotta love
Really?
them for 6 months before they love you back, but it's worth it because they're gorgeous.
Oh man, that's like it's like adopting a cat, 6 months worth of work, maybe they'll love you back.
Exactly. The orchids are the cats of the plant world for sure.
The cats of the plant world. I love that. That is a quotable quote. If we get nothing else out of this podcast, orchids are the cats of the plant world.
Yes,
Love it.
exactly.
Yeah. Thanks for being on with me. I really appreciate it. You're
Yeah, I'm excited.
you're usually on the other side of this. From my experience, you're on the other side of this. You're interviewing people. I know, obviously, you've been guests on other podcasts, but and that's part of why I reached out to you specifically. I just kind of have my moonshot goals. I just approach people of like, hey, would this be something you'd be interested in? So thank you for saying yes and joining me for this conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. I wanted to pick your brain a lot about content and personal branding. And, it's a phrase that I've seen you use a lot of copy my homework. And I was like, well, if you dare me to, I will. I will copy your homework. And but I love the you know, when I think about branding, you do such a good job, Kim, of branding yourself. And I know how much work must go into it. But, when I look at your website, look at your LinkedIn, look at the things that you do, everything feels like hair that's neatly put into it. Like when you kind of make your hair messy, but you plan to make it look messy. Um,
Exactly.
so when I look at your personal brand, I think, okay, there's a lot of work that goes into that. Am I wrong?
I wouldn't say for me personally that it's a
Mm,
lot of manual work. I would say there's been a lot of internal work done. So,
mm,
really getting clear on my own story, my own genesis, why I decide to share my story or why I
yeah,
decide to create content or because I know a lot of successful people that, they don't
yeah,
necessarily create content. They don't necessarily post on LinkedIn. They don't necessarily go on podcasts or have a
right.
podcast. And, everybody has their own journey. But if you do decide to do that journey as you have, I feel that there's an incredible amount of internal work that
Yeah.
you have to do to get really clear with yourself about what you want to what magical gifts you want to bring to the rest of the world.
Totally. This I have a feeling this may turn into a bit of a counseling session now. You've prefaced it that way. And
Beautiful.
I just realized also, yeah, I know you because I followed you for a number of years. We've done a little bit of work together, actually, which is exciting. But my listeners may not have had an opportunity to meet you. So would you mind sharing a little bit of your story?
Yeah, so my name is Kim and I am an accidental entrepreneur, as I always like to tell people. I think that's an important delineation instead of just
Hmm.
saying I'm an entrepreneur and to kind of rattle off about my business, only because I worked in corporate. I love corporate America. I'm very
Hmm.
pro corporate America. So that's why I use the term accidental entrepreneur because I have a lot of love for corporate. It wasn't
Yeah.
like I was one of those people that are like, corporate's terrible. I'm starting my own thing. But I'm an accidental entrepreneur, started my company in January of 2011. And if there's one thing I learned over the last 13 years in my marketing agency, where we mainly serve music artists or comedians or your favorite
Yeah.
talent and help them produce products and services to serve their super fans. So whether that is you walking into a Taylor Swift show and buying merch at the merch booth, or that is you walking in to see comedian Matt Rife for a comedy set and buying one of his hats, that's us. So you've
Yeah.
experienced our work, which is really exciting. But one thing I sort of noticed on that 13-year journey is I would have to kind of do my 30-second sales pitch about me, about my business over and over again. And what I learned is one, that's hard to do.
Yeah.
And two, it's a skill. And it's a skill that I soon started to teach other entrepreneurs and other founders and other friends and other colleagues. And that sort of grew organically into an entirely other business, which
Yeah.
consists of doing a lot of leadership workshops and conferences and speaking engagements to really help other people, raise their hand, find their voice, really advocate for themselves.
I love that. And as I hear you tell your story, I feel like I know a good amount of that because of how well you do in organizing and telling your story. So kudos, K.N.O.W. You are a practitioner of the same advice you dole out to other people. So that's always confidence building. So I mean, gosh, Kim, you've done a lot of really interesting stuff already. You've been on Shark Tank. I'm sure a lot of people ask you about Shark Tank. And
Yeah.
is that the company that you're describing, the Superfan company? Was that also the organization that you pitched on Shark Tank?
Yes, so I tell people that after 13 years, we very much model ourselves after Taylor Swift. So we've
Hmm.
had lots of different eras in the course of 13 years.
Yeah.
So in that 13 years, we've had three name changes, rebrands, refreshes. And, it's funny, I was talking to someone the other day that was very discouraging of that. It was like, well, Kim, you really should have kept your original name and built a lot of brand equity around that. And I think that for a lot of these like blue chip companies that we've grown up with, whether that's Johnson and
Yeah.
Johnson or Kellogg or Kleenex, it's like, you've had this name for 100 years. But I always tell people like, we're in a whole new world. And, when I started my business in 2011, I always like to tell people there was no such thing as Spotify. There
Yeah.
was no such thing as Instagram. There was no such thing as Snapchat. Like we were living in a completely different universe, even though that was only 13 years ago. So I think
Wild.
that, refreshing yourself, refreshing if you have a company, your name, what you do, your logo, your look. I think Taylor Swift is onto something. There's something about like different eras and different chapters and kind of blooming all over again, as if you
Yeah.
are a flower.
And I love counterintuitive wisdom in particular because that feels like something that is a little counterintuitive. That you're right. I mean, in terms of if somebody asked me when I was a kid, how do you define brand? I probably would have said logo or colors, and I most certainly would have pointed to some big company, Nike, McDonald's. I would have thought of brand in that way. And it really does beg the question and something in my mind about where does personal brand, business brand, in particular, whether you are a accidental entrepreneur or an intentional entrepreneur, these days, where is that line between company brand and personal brand? What are your thoughts on that?
Honestly, I feel like it's a really meshed cycle.
Hmm.
So much of us we are living our brand.
Yeah.
You as the founder or you as the CEO or as you part of the C suite or the C team, you have to live the values every single day. If not, it's almost counterintuitive. And I
Yeah.
think that it makes sense, right? In terms of, when people have a passion about something, they usually go and work in that industry.
Right.
So it's not hard to believe that they love what they do because if not, if they hated peanut butter, they probably wouldn't be working at a peanut butter factory. I mean, yes, of course, there's some people that do jobs that they absolutely hate, but for the most part, the reason we got into, whatever it is, you're a copywriter or you're a designer or you're a plumber or whatever it is, it's because you had some sort of kernel of general interest in that industry. And so I think so much of your personal brand or what you believe in or what you stand for and what the company stands for usually is pretty aligned.
Yeah. I love the metaphor. Now I'm envisioning somebody like from Smucker's infiltrating the Jif company. Like, I hate peanut butter, but I'm going to destroy them from the inside out.
Exactly. I'm going to learn all your secrets.
Right, exactly. They're probably owned by the same company now that I think about it. Going back to topic of brand and reinventing, refreshing. So it sounds like you're speaking about that from personal experience. When I think about you, there's so many different things that you do. LinkedIn Learning. I think that's maybe how I first learned about you is a LinkedIn Learning course. I am one of the 850,000-ish people who have taken one of your courses. So I did my research too.
Yeah.
And you do lots of other things, Kim. So if somebody were to ask you, Kim, what do you do? And you gave that introduction earlier in the episode, but maybe not somebody who would do business with you, but maybe somebody you met socially. It was like, oh, Kim, nice to meet you. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do? Do you feel pressure to include like all of the different things that you do? I do this, and this, or, how would you describe what you do in a social setting?
Usually how I describe what I do is I'll say, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Kaupe. And if somebody says like, oh, what do you do? A lot of times what I say is we work with really talented people, usually in the entertainment industry, and we help them create products or services that their super fans love and enjoy and purchase. And then I'll usually give one or two examples. And that's something, speaking about personal branding, I think so many of us, no matter what industry you're in, usually you're trapped in your own bubble. So your jargon, your acronyms, the things that you use on an everyday basis that comes so secondhand to you. If you are at a dinner party, if you are at your kid's little league game, if you are in this other setting, people are looking at you like, Medicaid, Medicare, what, or, in my case, it's like, oh, music artists, what? Right. And so they get very they don't understand what you're talking about. So a lot of times what I tell people, and I utilize this all the time, is analogies. Analogies are, to me, your best friends. I actually did it earlier. So if you're listening on podcast form, you can rewind and hear where I actually do this. So I create an analogy or a visualization so that people can understand what I do. So when I say that, oh, we work with, your favorite entertainers to create products and services, I will say, for example, you're walking into a Daddy Yankee concert. You go to buy a piece of the merch, a t-shirt, a hat, a hoodie, a sweatshirt. Yeah. Everyone who's with me at that point is envisioning themselves. And it might not be a Daddy Yankee. It might be a John Mellencamp. It might be a some other favorite artist that they have, but they've envisioned themselves walking up to that merch booth. And then I say, we did all that. We did the design.
That's awesome.
We did the production. We did the printing. And then they go, oh, right. Or I'll say, or if it's, holiday time or a friend's birthday and that they really, really love XYZ artist, and you go onto their website and you see that they have a coffee table book. Yeah. Oh, great. A coffee table book all about, again, an XYZ person here. I said, we're the people making that coffee table book. We're the people designing it and creating it. So I said, I always tell people those types of analogies or visualizations, because it helps them instantly understand what I do. And so that's one of the examples that I always tell people, not just for founders, for anyone who works at a job. Find kind of a go-to analogy or a go-to visualization that can help people understand in 30 seconds or less what you do. It's something It's kind of that Steve Jobs rule with the iPhone. Like a kindergartner should be able to figure it out.
Right.
You should have like one or two go-to examples that no matter how complicated your job is, or no matter how, in depth or industry specific it is, someone goes, "Oh yeah, I get it." Like you've made an example relatable enough to me that I have some sort of grasp on what you do.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if you've experienced this. I certainly have, where if I'm in the mindset of what's my 30-second story, or how do I, like, let's say I take that advice and I'm like, okay, good. Analogy, I can relate to somebody, they can visualize it. And then I don't know, randomly somebody will ask me 2 months later after I've done this exercise, and they'll ask me to introduce myself. And I'm 5 minutes in, like, oh gosh, I'm rambling on and on about every little thing that I do. And I don't know, I don't know if you've experienced it, but I drift from that sometimes. I think when I'm very intentional about how I want to share my story, if I'm going to be a guest on a podcast, I'm prepared for that. But then sometimes people will catch me out in the wild and they'll say, "What do you do?" And I'll say, "Well," and then I don't know why, but I start kind of laundry listing the things that I do, or the companies I'm involved with. And then I kind of stop at the point where somebody stops paying attention. I'm like, okay, I've missed the mark here. So why do people, even if you're kind of a little bit more intentional about, your own story, why do you think that drift happens?
Well, I think it happens especially, to someone like you that's has an exciting job, has so many
Mm,
different balls in the air, has so many different things going on, is there's a lot of things that you're passionate about. And the advice that I always give people and that I also try to follow is to what I call leave breadcrumbs.
hmm.
So what I mean by that is I'll use myself as an example for what we've talked about. So I have my marketing agency where we're working with, really cool people like John Mellencamp and Daddy Yankee and Taylor Swift and some of these people I named. Then I have my speaking engagements and kind of like the leadership coaching work I do. And then to your point, my LinkedIn learning courses, etc. So let's use those three examples. I will kind of give a little breadcrumb about each. So again, using myself as an
Mm,
example, if someone was like, "Who are you? What do you do?" I would say, "Well, I have this marketing agency. We work with A-list talent to help them create products and services. Really, it's really exciting. It's everybody from Oprah and Paul McCartney to Matt Rife and Daddy
yeah.
Yankee." Then I also do a little bit of leadership work with some talks that I do, and I also do some online courses. And then I stop.
Hmm.
So I've sort of given them three different breadcrumb trails. And it reminds me if anybody grew up reading like Nancy Drew or Hardy Boys, those like choose your own adventure books,
Yeah.
you can sort of see people and it's interesting to see kind of where people gravitate because they might, obviously hear something like Oprah and have 25 follow-up questions about, wait, Oprah, what do you do for
Totally.
Oprah,
Yeah.
and that's the breadcrumb that they follow. Or I have people that say, "Oh wow, wait, workshops, like speaking engagements, like tell me more about that," or online courses, like where do those show up? So you kind of leave the breadcrumbs, and then it also gives the other person a little bit of navigational pull
Yeah.
in like where their follow-up is going to go.
Yeah, I like that advice. It made me think about a little bit deeper on that comment about times that I drift, and I realize I do it more when the other person doesn't have a lot of context to our industry. So within the
Yeah.
industry, in senior care, senior living, the industry I'm a part of, I've as I go to conferences, I realize that we always ask each other the same questions. What do you do? What's your role there? And what I started doing was preparing to go into those by letting them know kind of what problem we're really interested in or what we're trying to solve. And so it kind of gets past the whole resume dumping of here's my job, here's what I was promoted to, here's the company I work with now. And so, as an example, within the senior living profession, I might say, one of the problems we're trying to solve right now is trying to help family caregivers of somebody taking care of dementia to be better caregivers way before they get to senior living. And then that's kind of where I pause. And inevitably, somebody, they're either going to be interested, I'm self-selecting in, or that sounds cool. Did you see where the bar was? And then they'll go somewhere else. But in a lot of ways, it's a similar kind of mindset of it's a breadcrumb that's enticing enough to invite questions and dialogue, or not for me. Nice to meet you. But I don't have a similar approach for people who don't know senior living. And it feels, I don't know, if I were to say that to you at a cocktail party and said, this is the problem I'm interested in, um, how, how would that resonate with you?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny that you say that because I have a framework that I teach and that I
Hmm.
use myself, and I call it the No framework,
Mm,
K.N.O.W.
right.
And so K stands for what we've been talking about, keep it short,
Hmm.
keep it sweet, keep it simple, simple
Right.
being like the key ingredient there.
Hmm.
The N stands for using names and numbers to help, again, that sort of analogy, like how I was saying, well, it's
Yes. Right.
Oprah, or, oh, well, you're using something that somebody can easily kind of latch onto or understand.
Yeah.
And I tell people all the time, it doesn't even matter if that name and or number is yours.
Hmm.
You hear it all the time. Someone says, oh, it's a new salad place in town. It's like Sweet Green,
Oh,
but no meat.
right.
Or, oh, it's a new glasses shop in the downtown plaza. It's like Warby Parker, but it's sunglasses, or,
Hmm.
whatever. They kind of use that. It's
Sure.
like Uber, but it's Lyft. You can kind of use those names and numbers where even if it doesn't necessarily talk about your business, it gives somebody a frame or a
Yeah.
reference. The O stands for what is ownable. So what you yourself do. I think one of the tragedies when you start talking to someone is they'll say, "Oh, I work for," again, silly example, but, "Oh, I work for Johnson and Johnson,
Sure.
and we make towels or whatever." And that has nothing to do with, you as a person. That's what the company does. But
Right.
what the heck do you do? So I always say the O is really what's ownable. Like, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? And the W, I think, is the most important part. And you touched on it, which I'm elated by because I feel like 99% of the leaders that I talk to forget about that. And that is what I call what's next.
Hmm.
And what's next is really, to your point, whether it is a problem or, a solution that you're going for, what's next? And so, for example, if I'm using myself, I could say, and this is what we do. And what's next is I really am trying to get into sports. I'm really trying
Yeah.
to get into work with more sports leagues, or I'm really trying to find more speaking engagements, specifically in the real estate space. I'd love to, I think people have a lot of leadership opportunities in real estate, or, you kind of, again, give a breadcrumb
Right.
of whether it's a problem you're trying to solve or your next goal that you're trying to accomplish. Like, what is that what's next that somebody that you're talking to might say, oh, well, my cousin works at a real estate firm, or, oh, my uncle works at a sports team,
Yeah.
and kind of gives you guys some common ground.
Man, that's really good. And you instructed on that at the event we worked on together. So that feels very familiar to me now that you've overviewed it. I'm glad we're recording this because people are going to want to go back and what was the N, what was the O, and then
Yes.
you got to practice it. If you don't practice it out loud, you're definitely not going to remember in game time. Like, oh dang it, what was the O? O,
Yeah.
own it. How do I own it? Right.
Yeah.
So practice.
You got to practice it. And I always tell people, this is not, I forget what that infomercial was back in the 90s, but it was like this contraption. And his catchphrase was like, set it and forget it. It's
Oh,
like a slow cooker.
yeah.
But he's always like, set it and forget it. And what I always tell people is with your story or this no framework or whatever it is, it's not a set it and forget it. It
Right.
is something that is dynamic. And I would say every quarter or every 6 months, give it a little look-see, give it a little
Hmm.
refresh. Maybe there's something else you want to add or something that you want to take away. It's something that is an active, growing thing, and you should be paying attention to it.
Yeah, I love it. Such good advice. Um, let's move forward a little bit from personal brand to a lot of people who are starting in the I don't know, LinkedIn world. I started LinkedIn a while back. You were an early adopter of LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You're like, sounds good. I'm in. You opted in pretty early. I, maybe 5, 6 years ago, maybe started really paying attention to it beyond like a resume job finding thing, which I think if that's the way people are using it now, you're using like 2% of the Ferrari, right? You're like you're using your Ferrari to commute to the mailbox. So we'll dig into LinkedIn a little bit, but really the core question that I'd love to address through this next part of our conversation is how do you grow an audience and why? Why would anybody, if you're not trying to be a social media star or an influencer or gain revenue from the social media itself, but you're utilizing social media platforms or other outlets to get your work done. So for us, Bella Groves, we're a dementia education company, we're an assisted living community. We're trying to change the way people perceive dementia and that you can have joy through all stages of dementia. So that's one of the things we're trying to solve. Think Tank, which was the entity, the event that you were a part of, what we are trying to do is to help change agents within the senior living industry to be more effective at making those changes happen. So I can certainly give elevator pitches to parts of what I do, but when people ask me, James, why do you spend so much time on LinkedIn? Like, don't you get enough business and revenue through your other channels? Like, why do you spend all your time on LinkedIn? And it is a question. Sometimes I know how to answer that based on who asked me the question, but the central question that I think most of the listeners to this podcast episode are going to ask is, why should I spend time building an audience if I work for X company and my job is Y and my next promotion is going to be Z? I kind of already know what's ahead. Why should I spend time building an audience on LinkedIn? What do you think of? Like, what's your response when I cue that up for you?
So what I always go back to because you are one of millions of people that have asked me this question, why, or it's so much work, or I don't want to do that, or it doesn't
Right.
make sense for me, or I'm an employee and, what do I get out of it? And so I kind of went back to this caveman example, if you will. So it comes down to two questions. And the first question is, at the core of we as humans, what is it that we're always looking for? Or what is it that most people, 99% of people want? They want more opportunities. They want more money. They want more connections. They want to know more interesting people. They want they want to be recognized in their field. And so that's a pretty common, I've never heard of someone say, what, a raise? No, not me.
No,
Get it
thanks.
away from me. Ew, more money, gross.
Right.
If you are one of those people, congrats. I hope you're enjoying your trust fund in Bali somewhere. But for most of us, if you say more money, promotion, raise, we're like, yay, hooray.
Yeah.
That's a very kind of a basic thing. And so then the second question that I ask people is, okay, if we know that raises are good, bonuses are good, promotions are good, knowing smart, interesting people, all good things. And then you say, okay, well, what's going to be easier? Is it going to be easier for me to kind of, again, using the caveman example, to like go be a hunter gatherer, to go like hunt after those promotions and hunt after those raises and hunt after those opportunities? Or is it going to be easier for me to sit back, relax, and have those opportunities come to me? And most people are like, well, obviously, Kim, the latter. I want to kick my feet up in my lazy boy and rest and relax and let all of the raises and more money and more opportunities and more chances for recognition come to me. And I say, great.
Yeah.
So you want more stuff. You want it to come to you. Well, the best way to do that is to leverage platforms like LinkedIn to talk about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because the more you talk about what you're doing, and by the way, I don't even care what industry you're in. I don't even care what you're doing. I don't care if you're the intern and you're 22 years old. I don't care if you're 65 years old and you're the CFO. You are doing something interesting in your everyday life that will help another human. So talking about whatever that is, it instantly brings other interesting humans or other opportunities sniffing around your
Yeah.
orbit, kind of coming around you. And so I always laugh when people say, well, you got so lucky, or James got so lucky, or so and so got so lucky. And I go, yeah, but what about those 62 LinkedIn posts?
Right.
Like, was that so? Yes, it was a
Yeah.
lucky thing that James got this opportunity, but was it also the 62 LinkedIn posts that collected the people that saw it, that
Yep.
shared it, that sent it to somebody else, that gave it to a friend, and then the opportunity came? So it's one of those things where you make your own luck,
Yeah.
you kind of build
Totally.
your own luck. And so I tell people all the time, yeah, are you thinking I'm going to post 3 times on LinkedIn and my boss is going to give me a raise? No, that's not, there, it's not as simple as that. But I guarantee you, if you post on LinkedIn for a year, a recruiter's going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Someone for a partnership is going to see it. I mean, it's literally statistics.
Yeah.
Like somebody's going to see it, and then all of a sudden, all of these lucky opportunities are going to start coming your way.
Yeah. I love it. So good. If you're listening, just save the last 4 minutes of this episode and just listen to those 4 minutes. Whatever else we talk about today is just gravy. But the last 4 minutes, that is a soapbox that I am firmly on myself. Is once I understood that the purpose of platforms like LinkedIn is to expand all of the doors that the universe is going to use. Like, oh, there's a good door. There's a good door. I read something recently about original people. So the Adam Grant book, Originals, and somewhere in there, I think there was some kind of teachings about it's the volume of work, not the creativity of work, that it ultimately will lead to great success. Is people who invent things, they tried thousands of other versions of that. People who write great content. If you looked at my LinkedIn engagement, it's just like just steady, 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 and then whoop, one little thing, and then steady, 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 whoop, one little thing. And so I don't go viral. Most of my stuff is pretty low key, but every once in a while, something big hits. It invites an interesting conversation. And I can say within my profession of senior living, and then you probably see that at a more global level, but certainly within senior living, I can honestly say that all of the professional things that I am proud of and enjoy now, I can attribute in some way back to my consistency on LinkedIn. And I think people don't understand, and I hear people complain or lament about, gosh, I don't have opportunities, or this, I don't know if I feel passionate about this thing. And James, you got so lucky. I do hear that, Kim. And I hear people say things like that. And I keep wanting to say to them, what doors are you putting in front of you? How are you letting other people know what you're passionate about? And so I, certainly feel like luck played into it, but I went up to bat a lot. I just kept going up to swing. And the other thing I tell people about LinkedIn is that what greater, what better place can you go and just have complete market study of your field every single day? I keep, the things I talk about. Are you excited about it? Great. This post clearly hit a nerve for people. Great. I can learn more about that. That thing that I loved and was passionate about. Okay, crickets. Not everyone's very passionate about that. So I constantly have this pulse on the industry because I'm putting out content. I was really paying attention to your portion at the think tank, which a lot of people have talked to me about and said that they really appreciated that part. So, it's been great to have an event like that where somebody like you, who is otherwise not involved, in a big way in the senior living industry, but I just love. I don't know why. That maybe that's a question I have for you. Why you said yes to the think tank? Why you said yes to this podcast? Because on the surface, it's not really related to a lot of the things that you focus on. But I'm curious for your answer, first of all, and then I have another thought related to that. A lot of people were very glad to have you at the think tank, but why did you, Kim Kaupe, say yes to those things when on the surface it doesn't seem related to like your world?
Yeah. So, there's extroverts and introverts,
Hmm.
and some people get their energy from different things. Some people get their energy by being alone and reading a book. Some people get energy from being around other people. I'm a little bit of both, but
Yeah.
specifically with the extrovert side, I really enjoy being around smart, talented, curious humans.
Yeah.
Hard stop.
Right.
To me, if you have those three very, very important skills, I'm sold. And I don't care if you're curious about real estate, if
Right.
you're curious about senior living communities, if you're curious about welding, whatever it is, if I'm around a group of engaging, smart, curious people, I constantly am learning or I'm constantly thinking about new things.
Yeah.
And for me personally, selfishly, I think that I get some of my best ideas or my best inspirations when
Mm,
I'm out of my own bubble.
love
I
it.
talk to a lot of people and they say, "Oh, Kim, I had such great ideas when I was in the shower. Oh, I
Yeah.
had such a great idea when I was on my run." And I was like, "Right, you didn't have the good ideas sitting at your desk, in your day to day.
Right.
You had the great idea when you were
Mm,
out doing something else that had actually nothing to do with work. You had the idea in the shower, you had the idea folding laundry, you had the idea when you're out for a run, you had the
yeah.
idea in the car." And so for me, yeah, it's going to a really engaging, dynamic think tank session. And it's on the walk back to my room that boom,
Right.
an idea hits or a solution hits. And I think that for me, that's where some of my best ideas come from
Yeah.
is not sitting at my desk in front of my computer.
I love that. It's a very intentional way to add novelty and like feed curiosity because when you're in a room where you don't possess the like subject matter expertise of the people there, you really have to pay attention. And to your credit, Kim, I just want to say you were super engaging. But beyond that, I knew that that was going to happen. Just in the conversations we had in the prep leading up to it. But what surprised me most about your interaction with our group was what you did once the agenda was finished, and you sat with us and like you hung in there with us of like we're sitting in a room off to the side and we're all just going on and on about senior living and you were dialed in and I really loved seeing that about you that you were I mean, it would have been totally understandable for you to just politely bow out and be like, "Well, thanks, guys. It's nice to see you all. I'm going to go back to my room." But I mean, you were one of the last people in the room with us. Like, okay, everyone's going home. Yeah, I'm going to go back too. So I can attest to that. This is not just a kind of a speaking point on your behalf, but it was really wonderful for me to see that you genuinely are just curious and interested in people.
Oh my gosh. And I feel like any situation where you have an opportunity to learn, to
Hmm.
me, it's like, why don't you take that?
Right.
Like you're in a room full of experts in their field. Why wouldn't you pick their brain?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you copy their homework? And not to say that every single thing is
Right.
going to make sense for you and what you do, but even if you get one or two
Right.
little nuggets out of that you're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
that was a really interesting thing and I'm going to be thinking about that for the next couple days."
Totally.
It's
Yeah.
huge.
I love the concept that whatever you're doing, you might as well double dip into it, triple dip into it. I mean, not okay for chips and salsa, but in life, double dipping is good, right? Just get as much as you can out of whatever you're gonna spend your time doing.
1,000%. It's one of those things where I'm like, if it's just my personality type, but
Yeah,
if I'm gonna do it, we're doing it all the way.
totally. Yeah.
And that's if I'm eating a cheeseburger, I'm getting the fries and I'm
Right.
getting a milkshake.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna get the cheeseburger with a side salad and a water.
Yeah.
If we're doing it 100%.
Yeah. Let's go for the full experience. I really love that. I want to thank you for your time, but I want to land the plane too, just so we can. There's one specific thing that I need help with, encouragement with, and that's LinkedIn Live. So you do a weekly LinkedIn Live, is that right? Coffee with Kim?
Correct.
Okay. Love it. Been on it several times. I try also not to comment all the time because I don't want to be the teacher's pet there, but every once in a
No,
while.
you have
Okay, I'm going to
to.
totally do it next time. Great
Please.
guests. really great interviews and tons of stuff to learn, which I love. And I love about LinkedIn Live that you can listen back another time. If I'm not available Tuesday at 12, then I can listen to it another time. Okay, I've been pretty nervous about getting started on LinkedIn Live. We have the feature available. Oh, and by the way, since I last saw you, they didn't announce it or anything. I logged into LinkedIn and there was this little blue LinkedIn thing next to my name. I was like, what is that? And then I looked it up and top voice and uh,
Top voice.
completely unexpected. And so it's there, which is amazing. Um,
Exciting.
and so there's all of these features of LinkedIn that I feel like I'm just scratching the surface of. And LinkedIn Live is one of the things I really want to do, but the fear, imposter syndrome, all of those things creep in. But also the other thing I think about is I love what you do, and it feels so universal in theme. And the things that I do, I guess there's this fear in my head of, well, it's just the senior living audience, or like who else besides our little club is going to want to listen to this. But so anyway, there's a lot of trepidation about getting started. How did you get started with LinkedIn Live? And if you were my coach helping me to launch LinkedIn Live, how would you guide me on that?
So I would say do three things. These are
Okay.
like my three. If you're wanting to do not only just LinkedIn Live, but I would say anything new. These are kind of like the three steps that
Okay.
I
Yeah.
would highly recommend that people take. So the first one being, and you mentioned it before, that I'm a big fan of like copying homework.
Yeah.
That no, you're not a snowflake. Your idea is not original. Nobody's ideas are original. The wheel was invented thousands of years ago.
Right.
Like, we're not coming up with anything new.
Yeah.
So when I say copy my homework, I always say if you're going to do something new, go find 4, 5, 6 people that are doing that. So in this case of a LinkedIn Live, you've joined mine before,
Mm-hmm.
maybe hop into like 2 or 3 other people's
Yeah.
just to kind of get a flavor of like, well, how does Kim do it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, how does Jen do it? Well, how does Shelby do it? Well, how does Jim do it? Kind of getting a flavor of different ways that people approach it. So that would be kind of step one. Step two, baby steps.
Mm.
I think sometimes people look at
Yeah.
my LinkedIn Live, which can go on for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour,
Yeah.
and think, oh my gosh, how am I going to fill 45 minutes to an hour? And what I always remind people is I started 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I've worked my way up. I started out with 1 push up. Now I'm on 10 push-ups, but
Mm.
I didn't
Right.
start with 10
Right.
push-ups. I didn't start with 45 minutes to an hour. I started with 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So baby steps don't necessarily, when you're out there copying homework and you start going, oh my gosh, well, Kim did it for
All the
45
stuff.
and
Right.
Jim did it for 40, baby step, like
Yeah.
15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, nothing crazy. That would be the second step, just like something very small, commit
Yeah.
to like 1 push up, one 15-minute session. And the last step, which again, for me, just really helps me feel more at ease,
Yeah.
is I want somebody to hold my hand. Now, they don't have to hold my hand forever. So again, using our gym example, I might just want to have a trainer for a month.
Yeah.
Just understand, okay, this is how I lift the barbell. Okay, this is how I do a bicep curl. Okay, this is how I do a tricep curl. And then
Mm-hmm.
after a month, it's like, okay, well, I can do my own bicep curls and I
Mm-hmm.
can do my own tricep curls. But, I'm a big fan of, can someone hold my hand in the beginning? Not forever, but at least kind of the training wheels on the bicycle.
Yeah.
Can something
Right.
help me to start? So in that case, I always say, my producer, Shelby, now works with people who want to start LinkedIn
She's
Lives. Like
awesome.
that is what she does. So she
Yeah.
will work with you on maybe your first, maybe your second, maybe your third. I know some people that say, okay, I'm going to do 2 sessions with Shelby. They're 20 sessions in and they don't want to give her up.
Right.
They're like, I love the training wheels and I'm never giving the training wheels up.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. So I personally am a big fan of, if someone can hold my hand,
Yeah.
even if I have to pay for that. But again, I'm a big believer in coaches,
Yeah.
trainers, if I can pay to copy somebody else's homework, or I can pay to have somebody come in and save me 25 hours of work and 50 hours of stress,
Yeah.
like I'll sign that check any day of the week.
Totally.
So for me, the three pieces that I always tell people is go copy some homework, start very small, like 15 to 20 minutes, and then get somebody to hold your hand, like a Shelby, who's going to say, listen, James, I'll take care of everything. I'll take care of all the art. I'll take care of setting up all the tech. All you have to do is show up in front of your mic
Yeah.
with something great to say for 15 minutes.
Right.
And I'll do the rest.
Yeah.
And to me, that's such a wonderful, kind of beautiful place to start from, because then the only thing that you have to focus on is you.
Totally.
Not, is the microphone working? Is the tech working? Is my camera set up correctly? It's like, let somebody else deal with all that.
Yeah.
You just worry about showing up for 15 minutes and bringing 110%.
Yeah, I love that. Very practical advice, which I'm getting to know about you, Kim, is you can be philosophical, but then right at the end of it, it's like, here are the 3 steps. I really appreciate that about you. And it's something that I can learn and level up myself. See, I embedded my own podcast name into our conversation. But it is one of the things that I recognize that at some point in the conversation, you got to land the plane. You hear the 3 steps, hear your what's next, the thing. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. And I also want to shout out Shelby, because she was so awesome throughout every interaction we've had. She's your Alfred to your Batman. She's the hero behind the hero. So she's super, really good.
She is the best. And I feel like it's just one of those things that am always really encouraging to talk about. I think more people don't talk about their help behind the scenes enough.
Yeah.
And it gives us a false pretense of like, wow, well, that person can do it all. And I'm a very big fan of, no, let me show you what's behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Like Santa's got elves back there. Like I'm not doing all the magic by myself. So I think that's really important. And I really am so grateful that you said that about, really giving those step-by-steps. Because I think one of my biggest missions in life is, I feel like so often we hear these inspirational stories and tales, but we don't understand how to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I'll go to a conference or I'll go to a think tank session and I'll be super inspired. Who's ever on the stage or whoever's on the LinkedIn Live is super inspiring. But then, I get back to my own desk with my own pen and paper and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, now what do I do?
Yeah.
Like, it was really inspiring and I feel motivated, but now what's my first step?
Yeah.
So that's something that I always really try to do, is give these sort of instantly actionable steps. So it's not just about, I'm listening to Kim and James and I feel really inspired, but it's, okay, here are 3 things that I can do in a few days when I'm settled at my desk and have a second that are actionable.
Yeah. This is probably the most practical level up episode I've ever recorded. So thank you for that. Lots of steps in here. Lots of 3 to 4 minute segments where you're like, I need to remember that. But there's a deeper leadership lesson in what you just said and what we're talking about here. I think a lot of leaders feel like their only job or their purpose within the group is to share an inspiring message, and here's our mission, and you guys are great, and let's go troops, and that's how a lot of leaders lead, unfortunately. And then their team members are like, what do I do now? What's the next step? So I think especially if you're in a position of leadership or, you're talking on a stage, keeping in mind that your goal isn't just to inspire, it's to inspire really so that people will pay attention. And then here's inspire and instruction. And as leaders, in any domain, but certainly in our field, I think it's not enough that you know your own company's strategy, but does your team know it? And do they know where they fit into it? Do they know their part of it? Do they know where we are in relation to that strategy in terms of a timeline? So I think being very instructional, being very explicit, but being very clear, those are all great leadership lessons too.
Oh, massive. And
Yeah.
again, over communication, always the
Hmm.
key.
Yeah. Kim, this is awesome. I hope we get to have more conversations like this. I hope we get to do other work together because I just mostly I mean I like working with you, but I want to interact with Shelby more, you know. And so there's the real thing. But she was on one of your LinkedIn lives, is that right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I have her join. We probably do one every 6 months
Oh,
because
okay.
again, I really love showing people behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
I Because you know what it is, selfishly, I want to see behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm looking up to Tony Robbins or Sarah
Oh, yeah.
Blakely or Richard Branson, I always think to myself, well, gosh, I'd love to listen to a podcast, not necessarily with Tony Robbins, but with Tony Robbins' internal team.
Mm-hmm.
Like how is his marketing
Oh,
what
yeah.
is his assistant? What is his social media manager? You know, that's the type of to me when I kind of nerd out, like the insider baseball, like what's happening
Yeah.
behind the closed doors. Like that to me is what I would love to be like a bug on the wall for.
Yeah.
So my own little, you know, microcosm version of that is, yeah, probably once every 6 months, Shelby will join me on a LinkedIn Live
Yeah.
and we'll do a session of like, this is what's working. Here are the tools that we're really loving. Here's something a resource that we've been really utilizing in hopes that maybe it's another leader or another entrepreneur or somebody else will go, oh, hey, like I could use that or
Yeah.
I should be doing that. Because I think that that's, to me, like the best type of homework to copy is someone who's actually out there doing it.
Yeah, it's so good. One of the people I follow, his name is Andy Crestadina, and he's all about content marketing. And I think, to me, his is the gold standard for like written content. When you read his newsletter, it's like, man, that must have taken 3 months of research and planning because he he is the antithesis of people who hoard information because they feel like, well, the thing that's special about me is I know how to do this stuff. And Andy almost takes the opposite approach. I'm going to give you all my good stuff for free. It's just here it is. Here's all this stuff that I know how to do. You go do it yourself. And naturally, you're like, I read his books, I read his newsletter, all of that. And then I'm like, you know what? I want to work with him. And it's this idea that if you share your homework with other people, they're not just going to copy it, but they're going to say, hey, this was good for my homework now, but I've got this assignment that I can't copy your homework for. Can I hire you to help me with that project? And it's such a good strategy of, yes, here's the stuff that you can copy on your own. If it helps you, great, kudos, Godspeed. But if you also need help beyond that, I'm here for you too.
1,000%. I think that again, that training wheels approach,
Yeah.
like
Oh,
getting
right.
that hand holding, getting that, somebody to help you
Hmm.
in the beginning. And, I also think that you got to have no ego.
Yeah.
A lot of people have a lot of ego wrapped
Hmm.
around like, well, I don't need any help and I don't need to hire somebody to do that. I can do that
Yeah.
myself. And I always say, like, yeah, that's an approach too. But I find myself gravitating towards the leaders who say, listen, I left my ego at the door. Like, I need all the help I can get.
Yeah.
If you have something, a tip, a trick, a tactic, a resource to offer me, like, I'm ready to hear it. I'm ready, or I'm ready to help, I'll pay for it. How can I get this help?
Yeah.
Whereas I think sometimes when leaders say, well, I don't need any help and, I don't need to pay for that. Okay. Like I always say, to each his own. But I find that getting the help is always been beneficial for me.
Yeah. Well, to that point, and as we land this particular plane, Kim, you are helping me in that regard. And the whole purpose of creating this podcast for me was to meet interesting people and to ask them questions that they would normally charge $5,000 for somebody to like have an all day session with. But I'm like, okay, thank you for your free advice also and your friendship and all of the great stuff. But it is in that spirit that when we share all of our best stuff, with this goodwill spirit, it always returns something on the business side of things. It would be an amazing thing for me if somebody was like, hey, I heard that Kim Kaupe episode and we engaged her for this $30,000 project. But yes, amazing, and I think that's how the universe should work. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Well, thank you. And I would love anyone, to me, anyone who's listening to you is, a friend of yours is a friend of mine. If they're listening to you, they are probably smart,
Yeah.
engaged, and curious. So I would love to talk to you too. So, as James alluded to, I go live on LinkedIn every single Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. If you are super into your calendar like I am and you love calendar invites, you can go to getcoffeewithkim.com and I will send you a calendar invite to hold the meeting in your calendar because I hold everything in my calendar. It'll say like call mom. Like I put everything in my calendar. So I know that other people are like me. So I set up getcoffeewithkim.com that will send you a
Yeah.
calendar invite. But yeah, I would love to hear from you. Say hi. I'm on all the socials, LinkedIn, Instagram under K.N.O.W. So thank you so much for having me, James.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here, Kim. Hang on for a second when we hit stop, Kim,
Yeah.
so I can say bye to you without just ending the episode. Uh, but
Yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
but for the listeners here, thanks for tuning in for another episode of Level Up Leadership Podcast with my guest today, Kim Kaupe. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Level Up Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the podcast and its YouTube channel. Better yet, share it with someone you know who is on their own leadership development journey. I hope you'll be back for the next episode of Level Up. But until then, I hope that you are leading well and remember that you are living your legacy today. So, make it a good one.